All right, let's move on. So now we're going to talk to a few tips for you, the presenter. So, we don't need to see the slide. How do you, what tools? Let's just talk about tools that you have as a presenter. We've talked about PowerPoint as a tool. It's a great tool. It's a nice visual tool. But what other tools do you have as a presenter?
Gestures.
Gestures. I love gestures. I use them a lot. And gestures I would put into a whole category that I just call motion. Motion is your friend. Motion can also be your enemy. I've watched presenters that look like birds about to take flight. Okay, they were Italian, but that's okay. You know, they really weren't Italian. But you can, I mean, if you're, it becomes a distraction. So you can use motion to convey emotion, right? Subtle kinds of gestures. Reaching out can draw people in. And so you can use motion effectively. You can also use motion to direct attention. So if I do this, where did everybody look? And if I then do this, where does everybody look? Hopefully. And if not, then I'm going to do this. It's okay. Motion. Motion is very powerful. But again, be careful of the danger. Sometimes one of the things that can impact your motion is nerves. Okay? I knew a trainer once, and as he presented, this is what he would do, and it was because he was always very nervous. Does this remind anybody of anything? Have you been to the zoo recently? And I swear that's what he felt like. He had to feel like this poor tiger or lion there that was just like, oh, let me out of here, please. I don't want to be here. I want to be anywhere else, right? So if you have nerves, it's natural. You'll have to work a little extra hard to maybe anchor yourself. Sometimes it comes out in pacing. Sometimes it comes out in a lot of arm movement. If you pace, anchor yourself. Go in and tape a box on the floor to remind yourself, I need to stay in the box. Give yourself your own visual cue. If it's hand motions, use your pockets. Be sure you don't have a lot of change in your pocket. Or it'll turn into some other distraction. Use your pockets. If you've got change and you forgot to empty them, use your back pockets. Just little things to try and just recognize how your nervousness shows itself. If you can harness your nerves, though, nerves can be a tool. If you can tap into it, there's a lot of energy in nervousness. And that's why it comes out in all of these, it's energy just waiting to be released. So find the right moments to release it. You've got a big point. This is great! Right? Let it out at those big moments where you want to let it out, and then it helps you kind of contain it. Right? It's like letting some of the pressure out of a soda and then putting the top back. Let it out when it's appropriate. So you can tap into it as energy. Here's another secret about being nervous. I know something about every one of you in here right now. I know that there is not a person that came into this presentation today thinking, I sure hope he does a terrible job. I really want this guy to fail. No. You came in here wanting what? Success. And because of that, you're really not focused. It's really, that's maybe wrong. It's not so much that you want me to succeed as you want this to be a successful experience for you. because you want to learn something. So this is about you. This isn't about me. Oh, if it's about you and not about me, I have nothing to be nervous about. Because you're looking for information. You're not looking at how I'm dressed or how much my arms really move or whether I really jingle my coins too much. You're willing to forgive some of that because you're more interested in what I have to say than even how I say it. And if you just remember that, if you just recognize that, it'll help calm your nerves. The presentation, it's really about the audience. It's their journey. I'll come back to that concept in a moment here too. What other tools do you have as a presenter? Voice. What about, tell me more about voice.
Loud or different voice scale.
Yeah, so voice. Cadence, intonation, tone. So if I want to convey passion, I can actually start speaking a little bit faster and louder, and all of this builds, and it's great! Right? Here's another secret about voice. If you go soft, people lean in to hear you. And I don't know if you noticed, but when I did this, the room got a little bit quieter. You can emphasize great points by actually going soft. Just as effectively as going loud. If you go loud all the time, it loses its impact. Change the medium to avoid the tedium. In other words, change things up so people don't get bored or become used to what you're doing. You can go slow and really drive home a point. So, pace. Pace is important. What other tools do you have as a presenter?
Eyes.
Eyes? Tell me more about that. Eye contact. It's real easy to go into a room and just sort of look past people. It's more impactful if you actually pause on people as you look around the room and make eye contact, draw them in. But be careful that you don't become creepy and just, focus in on one person and just, I'm going to do my presentation to you because they're not important. You need to keep it, very grounded. Make eye contact because, again, what does it do? Personalizes, creates connection. And connection lets the message go through. What other tools do you have? One of which I keep using here repeatedly, hoping somebody will pick up on it. What other questions, or what other tools do you have? Questions. What types of questions are there? Rhetorical? Open questions? Closed questions. What does a closed question look like? Yeah, multiple choice, yes, no. What types of questions do you have available to you is actually kind of a closed-ended question because it's limited to just a few responses. When do you use closed-ended questions? So to move the audience somewhere. So it's a couple of things. It's a great time management tool. A closed-ended question, especially like a yes or no question, gets agreement, right? So it confirms this is the point. But it also lets you move or manage time. Here's something that a lot of presenters do wrong. And I've watched this for the last 2 weeks here in Bratislava during presentations. And I don't blame the instructor, they didn't know Are there any questions? What kind of question is that? Are there any questions? It's a yes or no question. So what are you really doing? You're gaining agreement. You're not really opening it up to questions. When people ask, are there any questions, the psychological impact that it has on audiences, studies have kind of shown this, it really makes them think, well, I have a question, but he's almost treating this like I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't ask. I'll just wait and see if anybody else has any questions. And by then, the instructor's moved on. Are there any questions? No? Okay, let's move on. And that's about the cadence of how it goes. Are there any questions? No? Okay, let's move on. If I really want questions, actually I'll use something that's called a headline. I'm going to tell people, I'm going to give them some information. When you read a paper, there's a headline, and then you decide, oh, based on that headline, do I want to know more or not? So headlining is a way of giving some additional background. So I'll actually say something like, we've just covered a lot of information. This is complex stuff. I expect that there's a lot of questions out there. So right now, I want to hear the questions that you have. I didn't even ask a question. I just made an assumptive statement. I assume you have questions, and I've invited you to share them. And I've made you feel that it's okay to have questions, because this was really complex stuff. You're more likely to get engagement when you do that than if you say, any questions? Okay, so with that, are there any questions? Okay, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, there's just, the thing about presenting, it's a lot of little things. But when you employ all these little things, it creates this big thing that looks awesome. There's another saying in the US, the devil is in the details. And it means sometimes you don't see the picture until you see all the little details, and then you back up and go, wow, look at how all of that comes together. It's this amazing thing. I'm going to give you another tool. It's a follow-up. When you ask a question and somebody gives you the obvious or simple answer, there's a great request that you can make that will force them and everyone else in the audience to think harder. And remember, when they think harder, they're more likely to learn or retain something. I've used that statement here a few times. I'm curious to see if anybody's picked up on it. Has anybody caught on to the follow-up statement or request that I'll make after asking a question? Okay, I'll share it. Somebody gives you the obvious answer, and then you make the simple request. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. Because what you've said is, that's right, but maybe there's something deeper. Maybe there's some more meaning. I want you to go a little bit further with that answer. Tell me more about that. That is a very powerful statement. I'm going to give you another tool here now. It's the opposite of voice. Silence. Silence, along with questions, is powerful. There were a couple of times earlier today when I asked a question, and I waited. And I waited. And I waited. And somebody answered. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. This is one it's really tempting to answer your own question. But if you answer your own question, you're not really helping anybody learn. Ask the question, and then just force yourself to wait. And if it's painful for you, guess what? It's painful for everybody else. And somebody's gonna break. It's true. It happens every time. I measured it once in Penang. And in Penang, it's even worse because there's a cultural thing, right? And I asked a question, and I counted up to like a minute 20. It was almost a minute and a half of me just going. Somebody broke. And they answered. And after that, guess what happened? They started answering faster. Silence is a great and powerful tool. Use it. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of different tools here. Are there any other tools that you can think of? Visual aids like the PowerPoint. I like that you brought that up because too often we think PowerPoint is the only visual aid. It doesn't have to be, especially if I'm doing like training on a system. Why not show the system? Right? That's a more powerful visual aid than a screenshot of the system. Maybe I'm limited. Maybe it's not live yet. Sometimes there are limitations. But if there's something else, use something else. Don't get caught in just, it has to be PowerPoint.